Welcome back to the Broken Home Podcast. Our next guest, 21 years old, finds himself facing a prison sentence of 3 years. He had the hottest nightclub in Danbury, though. Ian Bick, how are you doing tonight, bro?
Good, man. Thank you guys for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. No problem. What we used to like to do is take it right back to the beginning. Can you tell us where you grew up?
So I was born in Manhattan, and my family moved us to my dad's summer home in Danbury, Connecticut. They renovated it. I grew up there in like this private gated community, went to private school for a couple of years and went to public school, Danbury High School, and graduated in 2013.
And as a youth, were you getting yourself in trouble, or was it just mild type of stuff that you guys were doing?
Yeah, we got into a lot of trouble. We were doing ding dong ditch. We were throwing, firecrackers off our golf cart. We were like doing like those ass chaser circles with bottle rockets where you take the stems off, you put a bunch in a circle, you light them and they go crazy and you run. And toilet paper people's houses. And I think the worst of it was when we took insulating foam one night and we did it against the president and the vice president of our community because they were like out to get us. So we wanted to retaliate, and we took the foam, put it on the door handles, and it ends up, we thought it would just lock their cars, and so they couldn't enter with the key, but it ends up dripping down the sides of their cars, $5,000 worth of damage. It was insane.
Damn. So it sounded like you had a pretty fun childhood, though.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely crazy.
How do you go into talking to your principal and talking him into an off the books dance? And like, how do you pitch that to him?
Just like I had it in my mind that I wasn't going to leave that room until I got a dance. So I'd seen movies and I had seen how like business deals go. So I dressed in like a suit and I put together a PowerPoint presentation. I literally thought of every possible thing they could have said to go against it, between security, police, drinking, anything like that. And I had a counterpoint to everything. And I made it so there wasn't an option for him to say no, and that it would look bad if he said no.
To take it back for the viewers, no doubt 99% of them are already going to know a bit about your story. You were the owner operator of Tuxedo Junction nightclub. Can you tell us, how did that come into fruition? Like, how did that evolve?
I did a school dance, like how I convinced the principal to do that. I then get into renting out this local nightclub, throwing teen nights there. They're very successful, thousands of kids. I'm making, $10,000 a night every month, once a month, doing these like raves. And from there, I get into the concert business, raising money from investors and doing these big shows at college campuses in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Lose everything doing these events. I end up lying to like cover up the losses because I felt bad for losing like my friends and family's money. And that's like what causes like the whole investigation and everything. But while that's going on, the investigation and all that, I get the idea to go back to my roots, and the club had closed down at this point. So there was an opportunity for me to go in there, take it over, and I was able to turn it into this massive music venue. And this is while I'm already hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I'm taking on new debt to try to make this work as like a second chance, a last hurrah.
Did you ever think that you'd be able to recoup the money in just a couple of quick events?
I didn't think I'd do it in a couple of events, but my plan was to take a year or two to build it up, build cash flow, and sell the business, create a brand. And if I probably had like 1 or 2 more years doing it, I would have been able to do it, because in like the third year of business, we were going to be profitable. But I just never got to that point.
In the Vice documentary, I don't know how accurate it is, but it said that you eventually owed money to the mob.
It was like biker gangs and like former mob members, people that like associated with the mob, but not like the actual mob themselves. Just people that were like related to them or out of that business. It was definitely a lot of shady figures I was dealing with, that's for sure.
And how were you pitching for the rest of your investors, friends, families, acquaintances? Like, did they already just know your reputation, your hustle, how good you were at organizing, so it made it a little bit easier for them to invest?
I think with my situation, there was multiple factors. One, that people saw I was like this whiz kid branded by the News Times, the Danbury News Times, the local paper. They saw that I was successful already with these concerts, and I think they liked my work ethic. They saw I was different. People want to get involved with people that are different. We see that in relationships. We see that in business and everything like that. Those people that stand out and just like work differently and act differently in a good way, though. People gravitated towards that, and they figured that I would be like that next big something. I think little did we know at the time I wasn't going to be big for concerts, but I would be big for something else entirely differently, like years later. But that's just how life works. And it brings us to the places that we never expect we'd be at.
I'm assuming, yeah, that if you were to turn back time, you would have looked more into the business side of taxes and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think going back, like if I had that money in that investment, it would have been more of a sound investment, like something that was a physical, tangible, rather than like something that was just like the concerts where like if I invested it into the nightclub, if I still lost, I would still have something. I would have the brand or I would have the venue, but where the concerts, you lose on it. There's no coming back from that. It's just that you're renting it. It's a one-time thing. And also anytime I ever trusted other people with money and didn't do the work myself, it always didn't work out well.
You think that's because they didn't have the same vision or work ethic as you?
I think the biggest thing was looking at business now is they didn't have skin in the game. People in business need to have skin in the game with you, and they had everything to make and nothing to lose. They were just equity partners, and they were new to the business. It's not like they were seasoned people. We weren't dealing with Live Nation. So we were just dealing with people that literally brought nothing to the table. And I was thinking I was already successful and sitting back and doing the work. Looking back on it now, like every time I've actually done the work myself, it's been successful.
I recall you saying that some of the most crazy times was when you were hosting house parties that got quite the turnout, and you were just constantly stressed working these parties, bringing food up to your parents, making sure they're cool. What was the worst kind of stress, managing those parties or managing that debt?
I mean, I think they're both kind of similar in different ways, though. I mean, anytime you're responsible for a lot of people in that regard, even like when I was doing the concerts, it's your job to make sure no one gets hurt, because that could ruin everything. It could ruin your whole business. So you're constantly on edge. You get nervous when the police or the fire marshal shows up. And then it's the same concept with money, like money changes things. People show a different side to them when you're dealing with money. And I think the most stressful situation for me was like, I was in a position where I didn't mean to lose anyone's money and I wanted to pay them back. So that's a whole new level of stress, where if I was like some actual scam artist or something like that deliberately took the money with no intentions to pay it back, I wouldn't have had as much stress as I was living with.
So it was most of your drive driven by popularity. It wasn't the money. It had to have been just like, being the guy.
Yeah, it was never about the money. I mean, now it's about the money because I'm trying to get to even. But I mean, before it was never about the money. It was about being popular, being well liked. Because a lot of my actions were always based on whether people liked me or not, and just like doing the next big event. Like there would be events I would break even or lose, but as long as I always made sure everyone had a good time. Some promoters back then, like if they knew the concert was going to lose, they would start going back on certain things. Every single time the event was a popping event, no matter what, even if I had to give out free tickets to the event.
If I'm going to one of your events, want to buy a drink, what are the prices like? How much money are you pulling in from the alcohol side of things?
Well, I actually own two clubs. The first club was just like the front room of a part of like the bigger room and we called it Sky Bar. We had a provisional liquor license for 6 months. Those drinks ranged from anywhere from like $3 to $7. A bar night would do like $2 or $3 grand, which actually wasn't that much, but it was a small space. And when I got into the bigger nightclub, when that other one folded, I didn't have a liquor license because I had no backers and I couldn't have a liquor license for my age. And so like we were selling liquor illegally, like bottles for a few $100. We were selling jungle juice, all this crazy shit. And then when we eventually stopped doing that, it was solely Red Bull, water, Gatorade, candy. But we made a fortune off of that. I mean, the most I ever made off that stuff was about 12 grand one night at a Steve Aoki show. And that's better numbers than most bars do in one night, mostly pure profit. Like you'd get a case of water for $5. We were selling each bottle for $5. So the return on investment was insane. It was a better markup than liquor.
And people get thirsty at a party. How many people are working under you to make this party happen? And what are you paying them out at the night?
Security usually got, $100 each. The bartenders would get like $100 each plus tip. It really depended on the size, and I would cut expenses when needed just to try to save. I mean, I was literally running this massive club with no money. Like there would be nights where just before doors are opening, I'm taking ticket sales to run the dollar store next door to get all the refreshments to stock the bars. And like I never had a bank for change. So I would, like, when I had ticketing money, I would go to the laundromat next door and I'm putting in the $20 bills to get change for the registers. It was insane.
Wow.
You had to have been running all night.
Yeah, it was like a one-man operation. I did everything. I was very hard. Like, no matter what anyone wants to say about me, like at the end of the day, I was a hard worker. I had the work ethic to do it off. And I think that differs me a lot from like some of these other guys like Billy McFarland or anyone like that.
You were like the Kobe Bryant of throwing shindigs. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was my passion. I hated the business side of things. I hated the money side of things. I wanted to promote. I wanted to market. I wanted to promote. I wanted to throw the party and organize things. I've always been like a great organizer.
The love of the game.
Yeah, I love that shit. I mean, that's why I like what I do now, because in a way it's similar to the concert business.
One thing that we are known for with Broken Home Podcast is we like to take that deep dive into your past. You said that you were doing the event sort of gain popularity. What was your popularity in school? Were you the type to get picked on? Did you always have friends? What was that like?
Like elementary and middle school, I was always picked on. Like I was called like chubby or Twinkie or anything like that. I got bullied a lot. But then when I got to high school, I mean, freshman year, I was like a nerd. No one really knew. But then sophomore year, when I started throwing parties, got elected vice president of my class.
So usually people that are growing up with the background of being bullied or being labeled a nerd, they tend to be like more introvert. You know, like it's kind of surprising that you come out this extrovert and now winning a popularity contest.
It's definitely so weird because I'm shy in a lot of ways. Really think it just depends on the situation. Like I was a kid that was always nervous and shy when dealing with like authority figures, but I would still go and tell those authority figures to fuck off. So like it was just like, it was just weird, but like I am introverted in a lot of ways and I'm extroverted in a lot of ways. It really depends on the scenario.
So let's take it back. What was your relationship with your parents? Do you have both parents? Were you living with both?
Yeah, my parents are still together. I live with them. They're like the most supportive people, especially given my situation. You know, they're like my biggest supporters. I would say my mom's like the very emotionally intelligent one where I get that aspect from. And then like my dad is the business, think differently type of person, entrepreneurial type, where I get that side and I get the work ethic from my dad. So mindset from my mom, work ethic from my dad. And between that like makes me who I am.
And only child, right?
No, I have a brother.
Okay.
He's not in the public eye or anything. Like he doesn't talk about anything. He didn't go on the documentary. I'll post him on like my Instagram here and there, but otherwise he keeps a very much different life than me.
What kind of age difference?
He's 4 years younger than me. His freshman year, I was already a year out after high school.
And the parents still on the lake?
Yeah, they still live there, and that's still their home. I go and visit them all the time. I still live in Danbury, but I don't live with them. Yeah. Once I got out of prison, you know, I got my own spot. I lived with them for a little bit last year when I was moving and in between jobs and everything. But other than that, you know, back on my own and independent, they don't support me in any way in that regard.
And before we even talk about prison and that, when you have that many people showing up to your parents' yard, what is it looking like in the morning? Are you cleaning everything as well? Are you going from start to finish? This thing is wrapped up?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I went from throwing these house parties where I was cleaning the yard, all the bottles, everything like that at the crack of dawn before my parents got up to make sure the yard was good. And then I did that years later at the nightclub I owned because I couldn't afford to pay a cleaner, and I'm cleaning the bathrooms and cleaning all these bottles. It would literally be a mound stacked so high of like confetti and this and that. And I was just sitting there like every time there would be a big event, I would spend like the next 7 days like going piece by piece through the club to clean it up. It was always just a project. But honestly, I enjoyed doing that. I like doing the hard work. I feel kind of lazy now, even though I'm working hard. I feel lazy because I don't do as much physical labor as I used to. And I'll still like help my dad here and there. And I have other projects going on, but it's not like what it used to be when you're like working physical labor 7 days a week.
Can you take us to your absolute favorite party that you've thrown? Who was there? What happened that evening?
I think my favorite would be like our very first sold out show at Tuxedo Junction. We had Blau. And that was the first time I had actually made a profit in like 5 or 6 years because I had gone through so much loss lost everything, under investigation by the FBI at this point. And it was just like the energy in the room, like the walls are sweating. It was a Wednesday night. It was a summer night. And against all odds, like we sold the show out, and it really put the venue on the map. And we're in this small town no one's ever heard of. And we have this up and coming DJ. And it was just like a great time. And everyone will always remember that as like a historic, show. We had like the biggest names in the game come through that venue. But that show, that gave me hope again. It's like, wow, there's something here. And I feel like that's what kept me going all the time. Like when you have like that hit where it's like, okay, like I failed in the past. This is a sign that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, granted, there would still be more losses down the road, but it kept me on the course. I think if that show didn't happen, I probably would have given up at that point.
And what kind of drugs ended up on the scene in these parties? Like, was it heavy, like ecstasy? What kind of shit was going on with the drug scene?
I mean, everyone was on drugs. I never did drugs. I never paid attention to drugs. I would just see like the bags of coke and weed and stuff get confiscated that security would find on people, but it always made it in. But I never sold drugs, never got into that, and never did any like hardcore drugs. Even back then, I always wanted to stay sober because I was in the public eye. Like I couldn't be 18 years old drunk or partying or anything because I was under investigation this whole time I run the club. You're under a microscope all the time, every day.
What do you think you changed the most once you found out that you were under investigation? Did you think in your mind, we got to wrap this shit up?
Well, if I had closed the club throughout the investigation, I probably never would have went to prison because I did things to keep the club running that I shouldn't have done. I mean, I didn't give a shit at all. Like I just kept going. And because my mindset was, if I make this club work, everything will be good. That's it. That was the only thing on my mind. Like I'm the type of person where I have my mind fixated on something. I'm running for that all the way. There's no stopping me. Like I'm going after that.
The days come, the FBI shows up, walks into your house. Take us through what happens after that.
So, I mean, like I got arrested. This is January 2015. I'm 19 years old and I'm indicted on 15 federal charges by the IRS, FBI, postal inspectors, local police department. And I get released on bond. And I end up going to trial. This is all while I'm running this nightclub. And I eventually, after a month trial, I lose half the counts, get acquitted on the rest of them. A year later, get sentenced to 3 years in federal prison.
Did you already know that you were going to be going to prison, or did your lawyer say that we have a chance here?
I think the whole time we never expected that I would go to prison. I think the judge had given me a lot of chances. He was probably leaning towards like house arrest or probation. But the issue was that I violated my terms of probation by going out of state to gamble because Connecticut casinos were 21 plus. I wasn't 21 yet. So I needed to go to the casino to like win money to pay the artists and keep club expenses going because the money was drying up. And that's how I get in trouble. My friends snitch on me to the FBI that I was going out of state because they wanted to take the club. Crazy thing about my story is that so much happens in such a short period. So this is like my fifth group of friends over like a 1 or 2 year time period. So this is a whole brand new group of friends that are like, I say the club stage of my story, that I had grown close. There's always like people leeching onto me at different points of my life.
And how much women did you have flocking to you at this time too? And how did you feel about that attention?
Not as many women as you would expect, only because I was so shy and introverted. There were no dating apps back then, nothing like that. But there would be like, like girls that would like send in nudes for free tickets on Snapchat. They would like see me at the club and they would like want to hook up to get backstage, things like that. I never pursued anyone back then. It was like they had to pursue me for me to do something. I was so unsure about myself physically that like I needed to be sure they were into me before I did anything.
I think that happens to a lot of guys actually. Like you're unsure where you stand, and especially in today's climate, you don't even know if you could look at this woman anymore. It's gotten so crazy with everything.
Don't want to be canceled.
No, exactly. You get the news, you're going to prison. Where are they sending you?
So I was at a detention center in Rhode Island, and then I went to Fort Dix in New Jersey, which was a low security prison, one of the bigger federal prisons in the country. Low security. There's people, that have a lot of years on their sentence, that have like committed serious crimes, that have worked their way down. There's fraud cases, there's sex offenders. It's a mix of everyone.
While you were in that detention center, was it an open pop? or were you stuck in a cell, locked down 24/7? What was that like?
There was pods. You're in like a unit and you're in your cell, like they'll lock you in like 4 times a day for count time, overnight, everything like that. There's like, it's the tiers like you see on like 60 Days In, the 2 tiers. You have the chairs and tables and TVs in the middle, and then you have like a little outdoor area. But it was nothing like when I got to Fort Dix, which is like a very open compound, able to move around, different buildings, everything like that. You get the fresh air.
Nice.
And how did you feel when you got into Fort Dix? Like, did you have any sense of security once you went in there, or were you feeling like somebody's going to try to harm me in here?
It was definitely scary. It's a whole different atmosphere. It's just so big, and you kind of have to figure out how to maneuver around. And there's barely any cameras, and there's barely any staff. There's like 1 guard per 400 inmates. And a lot can happen. A lot could go wrong. There's a lot of variables. And it's definitely like it's not like when you're in college and, you feel safe. This is like that same experience, but there's just so many uncertainties. Like you're dealing with a lot of dangerous people on an everyday basis. People that are only looking out for themselves.
I'm sure you're not planning on throwing parties in there.
No, okay. I mean, inmates do throw parties, but it wasn't like what I was doing at all.
You get into Fort Dix. What's your first night behind bars like there?
I mean, at Fort Dix, it felt a little bit more relaxed because I wasn't locked in a unit. I was able to move around. You're in, these old army barracks. It's 12-man rooms, 6 bunk beds. There's no lock on the door. It's 3 floors. I roam around. There's, bathrooms with your own stall and showers. And it was definitely a much better experience. The food's better. You got more portions. Just being able to, I think there's no worse feeling than being locked in somewhere. You can't move. You're on their time, just being locked in. I think that was the worst part about prison.
What are you doing to pass the time?
I got into fitness. I lost like over 100 pounds. I started working out. I was playing some sports when I got to the camp, and I played cards. I like to play spades. I gambled a lot. I played sports betting, and I did dice. And then I cooked. I had a hustle. I made like prison cheesecakes. I was kind of like all over the place.
Hey, that's all right, man, because that's what you got to do. You got to survive in there. It's a whole different world. It's a whole different set of rules. Was anybody trying to extort you in there or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, like I was moving around way too much, and I didn't like associate with like a car or anything. So some guys like from Baltimore or Maryland or whatever, DC, essentially tried to extort me. They wanted me to buy them a cell phone and pay them for protection. And I ended up just like befriending some of the biggest guys in there, getting close with them and just giving them commissary, and they kind of looked after me. And that's like, there's a lot of viral clips about paying for protection in prison. And that's kind of like where that comes from.
You didn't get extorted. You went out of your way to help somebody else with your commissary, so they would get the other dudes off your ass. Yeah, I see what you did. That's dope. That's dope.
What's the worst thing that you've seen at your time in Fort Dix?
I would say probably the worst, like the most violent thing. I saw a guy get his finger bitten off at the detention center. Another guy caught him in line, and that erupted into a fight. And the fight ends with like the guy screaming, "He bit my finger." And then we see like a little stub of the finger on the floor. And he's bleeding. And that was like really the only big fight I saw. Everything else, like a lot of it's times at the low security prisons, and there's no fights at the camps whatsoever. But even at the lows, like the units are so big. If anything does pop off, it's like in the bathroom, it's quick, nothing, huge, but everyone's not trying to get caught and get sent to a higher security prison. So that's kind of like the threat that the prison holds over you, But I would say, I mean, you would see guys getting caught with cell phones, and things like that, but nothing like crazy in a violent aspect. You'd hear stories about what would happen to certain people, but I didn't really witness anything like that.
Just wondering if you did the full 3 years that you were sentenced, or if you got out a little early, or...
I did. Out of the 36 months, I did about 27 months, got out in January 2019, and then I did about 4 or 5 months in a halfway house.
While you were up there, what was your family support like? Did your family come see you? Did you have a big support system? How was that?
My family visited me as much as they could. When I was in the Danbury prison, which was my hometown, they were coming weekly. When I was in Wisconsin, my dad flew out there and stayed in a hotel for the weekend. I mean, I went a year without seeing my mom or my brother when I was out in Wisconsin. But I talked to them every day. You know, we FaceTimed. They sent me money. We kept a connection together.
That's
Were
good.
you allowed to have a cell phone in there?
No, that they're all contraband cell phones. Guys were like watching Netflix on their bunks, everything like that. We're downloading movies. You're going live from prison. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Because some places they got the tablets now. Then you could do the JPay right over your tablet at the kiosk.
I
or
heard,
whatnot.
yeah, that's awesome.
How much did they charge for a phone where you were at?
They charged anywhere at the low security prison, go for about 1,500 to 3,000, and then at the camp it was about 200 to 300. The prices fluctuated, a lot of variables.
It's great your family was visiting you a lot. I'm sure they were disappointed in the turnout, but do you think that they were low-key impressed with your skill?
Yeah, I think my mom, not because she was never fazed by like money or popularity or anything like that, but I think overall she's impressed. I think she's impressed with what I've been able to create, and that I'm a builder and organized and have that kind of intelligence. And my dad is definitely impressed. I mean, it's impressive, you know, whatever anyone thinks about the whole thing. I think, you know, it's definitely, that's why the story is interesting, because, you know, I was an 18-year-old kid that, you know, not only raised all that money from grown parents, but that was able to own a nightclub and book these big acts. And I think it's also impressive, like what I've been able to create, even after everything, like despite all odds and everything like that. So there's just so many different aspects. And I think that's what makes like, this is like a whole package deal of uniqueness and makes me stand out in the crowd.
Absolutely. At the height of your gambling, how much do you think that you were dropping a night?
I won more than I lost, definitely overall. I mean, there would be nights I would, you know, win 20,000. There would be sometimes I would lose, you know, a couple grand. But I think overall, if you looked at it, like I'm up from that, probably like $250,000, you know, exchanged with that whole ordeal. Towards the end, I was losing more, but it wasn't like something where like I was just losing consistently all the time.
What was your game of choice?
I played Baccarat. It was electronic Baccarat, and I loved that game. That was the only thing I played. Occasionally, I would play like roulette and everything, but I don't know. To me, it was Baccarat.
How much time are you spending on these Baccarat sessions?
There'd be nights I was there all night. It really depends on if I won. Like if I went there and won big quick, I was out. But if I won and then lost, because it's so hard to wake away, and then I was fighting there all night to make it back. There would be some nights like the casino would be closing and I would go get a hotel next door because I want to go back and keep playing. So it really all depended. Whenever I was there, it was like a full outing. I planned to be there for the day.
I think I do remember you saying in a past interview that you were almost going to go right back into the same deal that you were doing. Did someone stop you from getting back into throwing these parties or owning a nightclub?
I think it was just unrealistic. Like I wanted to, I was fixated on it, and I would have found a way, but COVID would have killed that way anyways, like a year later. But I mean, I was trying, like I was just thinking options, this and that. And then, you know, I realized that it wasn't going to happen right away. So I got that job at Whole Foods. And I think once I got at Whole Foods, I was like, wow, this could really give me a new life. Like I fell in love with working for someone else and having guaranteed money. Like for such a long time, I was like, yeah, I'm never going to work for myself again. Like I love this guaranteed money. I know what I'm making, and I was able to build a life. I'm very grateful for that. You know, I got a car, I got an apartment, I rebuilt my credit. I did all these things that I never had before. Yes, I owned a nightclub, but I didn't have anything. My parents were still supporting me. So to be able to come out and do this I liked that. I enjoyed that. And then eventually I got bored with it.
When you were faced with owing all this money and just knowing that the debt is piling up, did anybody else ever take notice and threaten you about the amount of money that was being owed at this time?
People that were owed money were threatening me. It really depended on the situation, but no one from like an outsider's perspective was doing it. But I mean, I was getting threats daily, pretty much. They wanted their money, you know, like some people would say court, some people, you know, threatened with physical violence. It really all depended, you know. Some people kind of left it like a gray area. They just, when people want their money, you know, they want their money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you didn't ruin any relationships with family that invested in you earlier on?
No, never. I mean, I think a lot of my family that did invest knew it was like a risk, and they didn't. I mean, the courts, the prosecutors actually flew in some family from California to testify against me, and that backfired against them. It's a crazy story. It's definitely a crazy story with how everything unfolded.
I heard you say in one of your documentaries that it would have to be almost like a TV series to cover everything, to get everything out properly. Is there anything in the works to do that right now?
Not yet. I mean, we get offers, and you see what comes along. Everything's going to happen at its right time. And right now I'm just focused on the podcast. I keep growing that, and that'll get me to where I need to be.
Ian, at the end of all of our episodes, we ask our guests to give a positive message to any youth that can relate to your story, who maybe has the same drive and who might be thinking about going down that side road like you did. What would you have to say to them?
I would say, like, you have to fail. Use failure as a motivator to success. And that applies to relationships, job loss, anything like that. Use those tough times to make yourself a better person and to, figure out what your mission and passion is.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ian, for coming on tonight. What do you got in the works? Give yourself the shout outs. What do you got going on? Where can the people find you?
My main focus is the podcast Locked In with Ian Bick. And that website, ianbick.com, will link people to everything.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Yeah, guys. Thank you, man. Have a good one, guys. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.